here we go.
Welcome to the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast. Pat and Scott, we are going into Week 15. We do have one more matchup tonight in Week 14, yet to be played. It's the New England Patriots and the Arizona Cardinals. A bunch of teams on the bye this week. The bye-mageddon probably bit a lot of folks. I was able to wiggle out in my one league that kind of matters, I think. I'm hoping for the best in that league. Pat, did it crush your hopes and dreams anywhere?
It did. I don't know if I mentioned this last week on the podcast or not, but I really only had one league where anything was in doubt, and it wasn't even really a playoff spot. It was just the bye. I needed to win or the other person in my division who was a game behind me. If they lost, I would remain the 1 seed and or at least the 2 seed at the very least. I think I would have been the 1. But of course I am. Well, it's not over. I shouldn't say that. I still have, I guess by the time anybody hears this, it will be over. But I need roughly 60 points from James Conner, who's your sit of the week. So that's not good. And Ramondre Stevenson. So if they can pull off 30 each, I can come back and win. But I
Stevenson maybe, but I don't know about Conner.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. So it looks like it's funny because I tweeted this out. It was either the number 1 or the number 2 seed every week from the very beginning of the season till week 13, and I'm gonna end up going into the playoffs as the 4 seed now, and it just kind of sucked because you're kind of banking on that bye week for a while. And it definitely changes. Like I wasn't able, because I didn't have anything locked up. I wasn't able to go out and start grabbing defenses and stuff like that for the playoffs. I wasn't able to, make the roster adjustments that I wanted to make because I did have to worry about this weekend with 6 teams on bye. Really difficult to, I can't drop. I have Christian Watson in that league. I have Justin Fields. I can't drop those guys to pick up players that, I might want moving into the playoffs. So I kind of had to sit and wait. And now I'm going to be fishing out of the same pond as everybody else, picking up players for the playoffs when I could have been doing it a week early. So
it's tough, man. We're going to get into the injuries that affect that and the waiver wires and even some playoff streamers that we're going to look to give you folks. So hopefully it helps you, Pat. And, I'll see where I'm at. Like I said, I have the 2 leagues where I'm in the playoffs in the one, and then the other one, like I said, it's that bigger 32 team league where tonight I'm up pretty big. So I would really need to make sure that Robbie Anderson does not go, or Kendrick Bourne goes berserk. And I think I'm safe there. So I'll sneak in and win my division on that level.
Wow, that's nice. This is the first year you took over that team, you said, right?
Yeah. It was, again, a quirky league where basically every team was set up, I guess in the beginning a few years back, it looks like they were set up like the real NFL. So it's, the north, south, east, and what, all the divisions, right, the teams. And it looks like the rosters in the beginning were, and then they started to draft and trade and do what they had to do. So the roster I had was basically a lot of like the New Orleans Saints team. So I am literally with Andy Dalton at quarterback, with Jameis Winston as my backup. So they're out this week. And I basically that, and it happens to a lot of teams. You just don't have a quarterback, so you just don't get points for that. So it is what it is. And then the defensive players go berserk and get 25s and 35s. One guy had like 75 points this year. It was a linebacker from the Jets who just had an amazing game and literally like crushed the other guy by almost 100 because of that. Yeah, it's weird. So I'll see how it goes. I think if it looks like the way it is, I go against the commissioner who's got one of the best teams in the first round. So I don't expect to be around long unless things bounce my way.
Who did the Saints got this week?
We're looking at the Atlanta Falcons.
It could be a high-scoring game. You can put some points up there.
And they're playing for something in the bum fight that the South. Where a 4-9 team is just 2 games out of a playoff spot if they win their division. I've been kind of keeping an eye on that just because it will be neat to kind of see them run the table, and it also helps me out in my fantasy. But I don't know if the Red Rocket is going to have enough left in the tank. But
Red Rocket,
we'll see. We'll see what happens. Folks, again, we always appreciate you listening here. You can check us out at a lot of different ways. We have our website, www.the9routeffb.com. You can always drop us an email at the9routeffb@gmail.com. We are on Twitter at the9route1. And I am at Scott from Delco. Again, if you just want to drop us a line, tell us we are the best, the worst, anything in between. We'd love to hear from you and interact with the rest of the community. So we do thank you for that. Pat, you wanna dive right in and see what happened this week in news and injuries?
Oh yeah, I mean we can jump in and you know what? Let's move through these fairly quickly because I do want to make sure that we have time to get to those playoff streamers. I think that's going to be important.
Sure.
And with these injuries, like you and I talked about before, it's Monday, so a lot of these guys are going to end up playing this week. So we're reporting just to report so that our listeners understand and know that these players were injured. Whatever the case is. So
time for the news.
But before we get into the actual injuries, just a quick note. We do have our standard Thursday night game this week. That will be the 49ers and the Seahawks. And then remember, there is 3 games on Saturday this week. I guess no college football. So the NFL was like, yep, we'll take Saturday too. Thanks. So there's the Colts Vikings on at 1:00, the Ravens Browns, which would be a really good game at 4:30. And then Bills Dolphins, the nightcap, which is going to be, I believe, just one of the best games of the year. Is a lot on that game. So remember to set your lineups accordingly. Get those players out of your flex. You want to save those flex spots for your later Sunday night, Monday night players. That way it gives you maximum flexibility. So just remember there are 4 games before the normal slate of games on Sunday this week. As far as injuries go, a couple quarterbacks went down. A lot of quarterbacks went down this week. Some stayed in the game, some did not. Tyler Huntley and Kenny Pickett both left that Pittsburgh-Baltimore game with concussions. Neither returned to the game. With the concussion protocol is, we will have to wait and see till the end of the week to see if these guys clear that concussion protocol in order to play this upcoming week. And again, the Ravens, remember, play on Saturday, not Sunday. So Tyler Huntley has one less day to clear the concussion protocol to get back in time for the Browns game.
Russell Wilson was also knocked out of yesterday's action with a concussion. Some people might feel that he's had one all season with his level of play and a lot of crazy things that have gone on in Denver. But all kidding aside, it was a hard hit. Saw the grass hanging out of the helmet, the deer in the headlights look. Again, like you just said about the previous 2 fellas, that concussions are a whole different ball of wax. So remains to be seen if he clears protocol. If not, it would be Brett Rippon as his backup to start. And one of my guys, Mike White, New York Jets, got pretty beat up yesterday. Ribs injury, went to the hospital, it sounds like, afterwards. Nothing life-threatening or anything like that, but definitely probably a set of broken ribs, which means he's either going to play through it or it's going to be Joe Flacco, or you might even see Zach Wilson. But we'll have to keep an eye on that, as well as Russell Wilson throughout the week.
I think I saw that Mike White, the Jets are preparing as if Mike White is going to play. So if it's a pain thing, I'm sure he's just going to suck it up and stick it out and go. But
because he's Mike effing White. That's right.
He's got his own T-shirt.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Another quarterback injury. Tom Brady had a minor hand injury, smacked it on a helmet during a throw in yesterday's game. Nothing really to worry about. He played through the injury, just a little bit of ice and rest for Brady. Moving on to the running back position, Mike Boone left the game with an ankle injury for the Denver Broncos. Mike Boone isn't really a fantasy option, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. Dameon Pierce, however, is a fantasy option for most people. He left with an ankle injury as well, did not return. Again, he's going to be one of those guys that if you have been counting on Dameon Pierce, you've probably been let down recently. But also you're going to need to at least monitor the situation and see if there's somebody that you're going to want to pick up in order to replace him. I wouldn't suggest picking up any running backs on the Houston Texans. I just don't really think anybody has the talent that Pierce does, and it's just not a high-powered offense. So I would be looking elsewhere if Pierce does not play this week.
Another running back looks like the last one we're going to talk about for today. Thank goodness. Jeff Wilson, got him on a couple of my teams. Traded from San Francisco. Has had very good success, obviously, with that coaching staff, knowing his pedigree. Picked up a little bit of a hip injury. I actually was on my way home from work, and I heard them talking about it. That he limped to the sidelines, did not return. It's one of those day-to-day, and, will be questionable, and keep an eye throughout the week. And again, that's a Saturday start, so that could come sooner than later. Determination on Jeff Wilson. And then a couple injuries to, one of the best wide receiving cores in football, if not the best. Tyler Boyd, dislocated finger during his matchup, did not return. Again, that's something that now that it's been checked out, he could get cleared, but obviously being a wide receiver, having a bad finger is going to be an issue, needless to say. And obviously Jamar Chase is still trying to get back to 100% from his previous injury. And T. Higgins, might as well round out the triplets there. Hamstring injury. I played one play and then came out, did not return. Again, if one or the other guy is out, then technically that other guy would be the target share leader, or you might even look to a Hayden Hurst at tight end if he's still active and doing his thing. But that's a couple big hits on Cincinnati Bengals wide receiving core. And that could be even a downgrade for Joe Burrow, unfortunately, going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think Hurst is still out too, like you said. And if either of these guys don't play, you could be looking at 15 plus targets for Jamar Chase next week. Who knows?
Samaje Perine will get 48 carries for 300 yards. Yeah.
A couple other wide receivers going out with injury. Kendall Hinton had a hamstring injury. He left the game as well. He's not really an option that I'm looking to start anywhere. If Cortland Sutton doesn't return next week, which I expect him to, but if he doesn't, Hinton could be one of those guys. I really don't want to go into a playoff matchup with Kendall Hinton in my lineup anywhere. So
he can play quarterback too, though.
Yeah, that might be the position you're in, or they're in next week if Rippon goes down. Tyreek Hill also picked up an ankle injury. If you watched the game last night against the Chargers, looked like it was pretty early. He did play through it the entire game. Just got a little extra tape. They were constantly, every time he was on the sideline, he was. They were working on his ankle and just, making sure everything was tight and the tape was good. Shouldn't be a problem. He did, like I said, he did finish the game. So I'm pretty sure it's just a pain management thing moving forward from here. He should be fine for their matchup against Buffalo on Saturday night.
Another concussion protocol, head injury to Corey Davis during the 20-12 loss to the Buffalo Bills. He got kind of kneed in the head, during a completion. And, for all the technology with the helmets, it does seem like, some of this stuff does show up more. But again, it's a violent game. Corey Davis, he will be in concussion protocol. And just like we mentioned in previous guys, again, he may not be a solid starter for some. He may be a quality flex for others. But you're probably going to have to look at him as probably not being startable this week, even if he does clear protocol, because they have a lot of weapons in that offense. But again, you're also looking at the quarterback position and if Mike White or somebody else plays.
Yeah, exactly. Deebo Samuel, he was actually carted off the field with an ankle injury. Yeah. This is actually better news than, when I watched this game and saw the injury live, and it looked bad. It looked like a knee. It looked like his knee got twisted around. And
it was nasty, man.
Yeah. As it turns out, it was just his ankle, which was nice. But the fact that he was carted off with tears in his eyes, I think, players obviously they're not crying from pain in most instances. These guys are way tougher than that. I would be bawling like a baby, but these guys are a lot tougher. And I think the tears came from him knowing that he's definitely going to miss some time. Right now, it looks like it's probably a high ankle sprain. More than likely will miss next week's game versus the Seahawks, but, hopefully not too much more after that. As much as, like I said before, the 49ers scare me as an Eagles fan, I definitely enjoy watching the San Francisco 49ers offense with Deebo out there, with McCaffrey, Kittle, and with Brock Purdy. They're moving the ball extremely well and put up, 35 yesterday? So really good game all around from the 49ers offense. And then our last one. Well, go ahead.
You moving to California, man? You sound like you're in love.
I'd move to California. It's beautiful out there. Last one, we're going to hit Daniel Bellinger, New York Giants tight end. Again, probably not a big fantasy option, but did leave the game, did not return with a rib injury. And as of right now, seems like he'll be okay. It was just something that he couldn't come back from in that particular game, and I don't really think it would have helped anyway. So there was no point in getting him hurt more. I think the Giants were smart about that and just kept him out the rest of the game. But he should be okay to play against Washington in Week 15.
That's going to do it for our news and injuries update. We're going to move on, like we said. We're going to fly through and jump into our Week 15 waiver wire picks. A lot of these guys you're going to hear we have talked about previously last week, the last couple weeks, because that's kind of how it works. And with the injuries just discussed, these are guys that if you haven't already had a chance to, now's the time to get them off of the waiver wire and onto your roster.
Weekly waiver wire.
I'm going to go through the top 3 running backs that we have available. First up, Zonovan Knight. Bam Knight. To some others, it depends on what site you're on. He's been getting picked up quickly, about 50%. He's rostered, so you may have a shot. He may have been dropped, by some owner randomly to make a move, whatever. Played about half the snaps in Week 14, led the team in carries, and really kind of looks like he's that guy. He's going to be a fixture for them. Obviously, Breece Hall being out, at least for this season. But for a guy to come on strong like that, I got to think they're going to get him involved. Michael Carter, everybody there moving forward next year. James Robinson, they got a lot going on there at running back. Another guy we're talking about is Cam Akers, who is, like we said, the de facto RB1 and one of the biggest offensive weapons they have for the Los Angeles Rams. He's another one who is pretty much rostered in about half most leagues. Week 14, I kind of thought maybe he'd have a bigger game. I was close, but it didn't quite work out. But he had 12 carries for 42 yards and a touchdown in Week 14. There is still some sharing going on in that backfield. And again, they're really just kind of going through the motions at this point. But he does have some pretty good matchups coming up down the stretch, which is something we'll talk about. Weeks 15 and 17, respectively. Green Bay Packers and the Los Angeles Chargers, 2 teams that are a little suspect against the running back position. So maybe worthy of an RB2 or a flex if he's still available. Finally, Jerick McKinnon. It's kind of up and down in that backfield, depending on the hot hands, things of that nature for Kansas City. But he's still available in about, he's only about 38% rostered. He had a pretty solid game yesterday, to say the least. 6 carries for 22 yards, 9 targets, 7 catches, 122 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Basically, he's RB1 going into Monday Night Football for Week 14, and the chances of him being usurped from that position is highly unlikely. Another guy with 2 solid matchups back-to-back weeks. Next week, they have the Houston Texans, followed by the Seattle Seahawks. So, again, Jerick McKinnon, if he's available, get him on your roster for that playoff push, and he may be out on your waiver wire right now. Go get him.
Yeah, we've been talking about McKinnon for a few weeks now and Akers and Knight. So the fact that their roster percentages are rising is we know that people are catching up. So if you're listening to this, get out there this week before your league mates go out and grab these guys. Even if you don't use them, if you got roster spots, keep them away from your opponents. You don't want any of these guys, getting used against you and beating you in a playoff matchup. And for McKinnon, he's the RB1, but I need him to be the RB3 by the end of the week. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I'm hoping he finishes right around 3, right at 3.
Good. Yeah, it's legal in Jersey, folks. Yep, that's right.
All right, I'm going to hit a couple of wide receivers here. First, Donovan Peoples-Jones. He's 47% rostered. I don't understand why. This guy should be rostered in pretty much every league at this point. He's wide receiver 37 overall on the season. I mean, I'm looking at some of these roster percentages, and there's players out there that are injured that are not coming back this year. There's other players who, haven't done anything who are more rostered than Donovan Peoples-Jones. This is a guy that I have been on for a while. The talent is there. The quarterback is starting to catch up. He led the team in targets this past week, and he's got 4 really good matchups throughout the rest of the playoffs. So if Donovan Peoples-Jones is available in your league, you need to go out and get him right away. He is a guy that can absolutely be started in the right matchups, which, like I said, he's going to have good matchups moving forward. And Deshaun Watson is only going to get more and more, back to what he was post holdout / suspension. So I talked before about him becoming the Will Fuller of this team. That's the kind of skill set that he has. And if you remember, Will Fuller was a league winner for people a few years ago when him and Watson played in Houston. So definitely go out and get this guy. Absolutely, without a doubt, if he's available in your league. He shouldn't be on your waiver wire after this week. Paris Campbell's another guy you can go out and pick up. He's only rostered in about 28% of leagues. He's still a usable flex option as long as Matt Ryan is at QB. And I think as long as, like I said last week, as long as Jeff Saturday remains the head coach, which seems like that's going to be the case, he's doing a pretty good job. Matt Ryan's going to be the quarterback, and Paris Campbell and Michael Pittman are going to be usable fantasy assets. Especially this week, he's a really good start against Minnesota. We'll get into that maybe a little bit later on in the week, but definitely a good play and a good guy to have on your bench. One more wide receiver I'll go over, and then I'll let Scott jump back in here. Darius Slayton is 38% rostered. I've been banging the drum for him as well. He had a pretty predictable stinker this week. It was actually my sit of the week, which kind of saw this one coming, but he does have two good playoff matchups, week 15 and 16. Week 15 against Washington, where he just put up double-digit fantasy points, and then week 16 versus Minnesota, who everybody puts up double-digit fantasy points against, it seems like. So definitely go out if you got some injuries at wide receiver, if you lost T. Higgins, or you got any doubt as far as your flex players. Darius Slayton is definitely a guy who is a number one on his team and can very easily be slid into your flex position with no problem, and you should get good production out of him at least the next 2 weeks.
Last couple of fellas we are going to talk about. Again, they're a little under the radar and not maybe heavily rostered, but again, probably worth maybe a look as the playoffs near. Nico Collins of the Houston Texans. Yes, it's a Houston Texan. I understand they're not really a offensive juggernaut, but he basically is their wide receiver one. He did sit out week 14 with a foot injury. He's been a little banged up this year, but very productive and heavily targeted when healthy, whether it's Davis Mills, when it was Kyle Allen, whatever happens down there. Again, he's really going to be that guy, and they want to see what he is moving forward as he's a young up-and-coming player on a team that might actually get a quarterback in the draft and suddenly start to build something down there in Houston. They gave Dallas a run for their money yesterday. So, again, Nico Collins, he's only rostered, he's under 20%. So, again, he should be available. Might be a nice stash piece on your bench. And, again, injuries happen. You might even be forced to throw him in as a flex or a wide receiver, too. Speaking of injuries, a guy that just returned from one, Jameson Williams of the Detroit Lions, young rookie. A lot of people probably had him stashed on IR slots, but he is available in about 12. It's only rostered in about 27%, so not even 30% of the leagues is he rostered. Caught his first NFL ball yesterday for a touchdown. So if that gives you maybe any hint, he only had 2 targets, but that team is starting to become a little bit of a thing in Detroit. Jared Goff looks like he's maybe finally really figured out how to play QB and has some guys around him with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jameson Williams should be available and worth putting on your bench. And if they do go for a playoff push in Detroit, he may be in your lineup for a playoff push. And then finally, wouldn't be waiver wire if we weren't talking about the slight drama that is Odell Beckham Jr. Some people might not really be interested in him. It doesn't look like he may sign during the regular season. It might be somebody in the NFL's playoff push. Like, okay, we talked about some injuries with the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay, is he going to go play for Cincinnati? He's going to want to get paid. He's going to want the right situation. It sounds like it's 1 or 2 teams tops, Dallas or the Giants. So, again, both teams right now look to be in the playoffs as far as the NFL goes. The Giants a little less firm. Dallas looks pretty solid. ESPN has them winning the Super Bowl and being the best team in football. We won't even talk about that. But, yeah, Odell Beckham Jr., I mean, at this point, if you want to throw him on your roster, but it's not like you have to hold on to him. If there's a better option out there, some of the guys we named, go get him right now, even if you're backing up a defense or a kicker, if you're playing those kind of leagues because you just want to get those matchups set, it wouldn't be worth holding on to a guy like this.
Yeah, we talked about him leading up, the past couple of weeks, but that was under the assumption that somebody was going to sign him. I think he visited some teams and teams didn't seem too interested in signing him. And then he had put something out on Twitter about only playing in the playoffs, something like that. I don't know if that was to save him at all from embarrassment. But I don't think that as far as the fantasy playoffs goes, which, obviously happens during the regular season, I don't think he's going to be much of a factor during that time. So if you did take our advice and pick up Odell Beckham, you can probably safely drop him at this point. I mean, you can hold on to him too. I mean, it's completely up to you. If you do think he's going to sign, hold on to him. I am clearing him off my rosters that I have, which I think is only one. But I'm not really at this point. If he signs, he's not playing until week 16, right? And then he's going to have to show me that he's got a good game, like one good game in him before I'm willing to start him. And then by that point, it's my fantasy championship. I'm not really willing to risk that. If I've gotten to the fantasy championship without Beckham, I probably have a good enough roster to win it without him. So not really, I would have needed him to sign like this past week in order for me to really consider him on my fantasy rosters moving forward. So that's just how I feel about it personally. All right. Well, that does it for our running back and wide receiver waiver wire pickups. We do have playoff streamers for you today as well. A little bonus heading into week 15. Some guys where, like Scott and I talked about before the podcast, if you lost your quarterback, or if you had been streaming quarterbacks, or maybe you drafted a guy like Aaron Rodgers to be your quarterback and halfway through the season realized this guy is not going to get it done, and you had to, sort of stream from there. We kind of put a list of streaming options together for you at quarterback, tight end, and at defense. And we're just going to run through them kind of real quickly here and just give you a couple of the better matchups that they have moving forward. And you make your decision from there. But if you are looking at trying to stick with one guy throughout the playoffs, because I do think it's a little bit more, I won't say it's more difficult because there's less teams on the waiver wire, but I think the teams that are in it, the teams that are in your playoffs are doing a lot more generally to pick guys up to block you, to, maybe grab some people off the waiver wire ahead of you. So the guys that we're going to give you today are guys that you can probably play throughout the playoffs, or you could combine them together based off of their matchups and maybe get a good point total from these streaming positions. So we'll start at the quarterback position. We had talked a lot recently about Jimmy Garoppolo having a really good schedule down the stretch. Of course, then he goes out and gets himself hurt, and that leaves us with Brock Purdy, who honestly wasn't even going to mention in this section, but the way he played yesterday was impressive. The way he played in, the remainder of that game in week 13 was impressive, and nothing changes. He still has talented players around him. Now it looks like Deebo Samuel may miss some time, which probably doesn't help his, fantasy outlook, but honestly, I don't think it matters. Like, he seems like he is actually a good quarterback, and his matchups at the end of the season, he's got Seattle week 15, Washington week 16, and then the Las Vegas Raiders, who are the second worst versus the quarterback position in the championship week. So if you make it to your championship with Brock Purdy, not a bad guy to get you there, Mr. Irrelevant. If you can win a championship with Mr. Irrelevant, there should be something extra like on your trophy or your belt that denotes your fantasy football expertise. Another guy with some good matchups. Now, I know you're probably a little weary to start this guy at this point, especially considering that we just reported that he came out of the game with a concussion, but I want to throw it out there for you because there is a couple of good matchups, and he did actually have a good game before leaving against the Kansas City Chiefs this week. Russell Wilson gets to go up against the Arizona Cardinals in week 15. Has a little bit tougher game against the Rams in week 16, but then gets those Chiefs again in week 17, where the Broncos are going to have to score to keep up with the Chiefs. So, again, Russell Wilson may not be a bad streaming option. If you drafted him to be your QB1 this year and he let you down, I get it. I'm there with you. I've one of my teams is just completely decimated because of Russell Wilson, but it's not going to stop me from picking him up and playing him if he's the best option, and he's got some good matchups moving forward. So it's a possibility that he could be.
We are going to talk about Matt Ryan. Yes, folks, Indianapolis Colts quarterback Matt Ryan. He will definitely be available out there, I would think, as a streaming option. Finishes out pretty strong as far as his matchups go to finish out the season. The Minnesota Vikings you got this week, the Los Angeles Chargers, the New York Giants, a little tricky there at the end, but again, to get you maybe over the hump for the sake of a week, right now, again, that's an option for you in an offense that's coming off a bye week. So they may have, a little bit of a game plan moving forward. Mike White, we did talk about. Again, got to keep an eye on the injury. If that rib thing is serious or affects his play, he may not have his mojo that he's had from time to time. Again, he had a tough game yesterday against Buffalo, but has some really solid, what looks to be pretty much like season-long top 10 matchups. Detroit Lions, Jacksonville Jaguars, and Arizona Cardinals over the last 3 weeks here going into week 17. And then finally, Mac Jones hasn't had a phenomenal season, but sandwiched around the Cincinnati Bengals, you're looking at the Las Vegas Raiders coming up this week in week 15. The Cincinnati matchup you might want to avoid, but keep him on your bench because then following week he goes up against those Miami Dolphins, who, again, these are teams that are going to bleed points out to quarterbacks. Doesn't matter what happens in the real game, but if Mac Jones can put up 25 points a game in those two, that could be a league winner for you folks if you need it.
Yeah, I really like Mike White if he is healthy in this one or comes back healthy for the end of the season. He's got really good matchups, and the Jets are at the point where they need to win as many games as they can to get into the playoffs. So they're going to be going hard in the paint during these games and trying to put up some points against some of the really porous defenses. So if Mike White is out there, he's my choice, as far as a streaming quarterback that you can basically pick up this week if he's available and would just plug him into your lineup for the rest of the postseason and not really worry too much, again, assuming health. Moving on to the tight end position, there's a couple of tight ends here that, again, have some good matchups. Doesn't necessarily mean that we're suggesting that you pick up and play all these guys, but we do want to give you the information that you can go out there and make that choice for yourself. Trey McBride, the Arizona Cardinals tight end, they haven't played yet this week, so we're going to see how involved he is in the offense. Zach Ertz, obviously being gone for the year, McBride has basically become the starting tight end for them, and he's got a couple of good matchups down the stretch. Denver in week 15, which isn't great, but they haven't been, as good against the tight end as they have against a lot of the other positions. It's that the one weakness in their defense. The Tampa Bay Bucks and the Atlanta Falcons, who are both bottom 12 in points against the tight end position. So again, if Trey McBride starts to become a little bit bigger part of this offense, he could be a sneaky pickup for your playoff run. We also have Tyler Conklin for the New York Jets. His playoff matchups are the Detroit Lions, Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Seattle Seahawks. Again, 3 teams who are bottom 12 against the tight end position in fantasy football. And like we just talked about with Mike White, Jets are going to have to put some points on the board, especially against Detroit. I mean, all these teams that they're playing, Detroit, Jacksonville, and Seattle, have all been pretty high-scoring teams. Some surprisingly, some maybe not so surprisingly. But, as good as the Jets' defense has been this year, I think their offense is going to have to step up if they want to win some games and make the playoffs.
Moving on, 2 more tight ends to talk about. Big shot Bob, Robert Tonyan of the Green Bay Packers. Touchdown machine at times, but definitely the season that Aaron Rodgers has had, it's one of those deals where, he's been a go-to. He's got a couple solid matchups, one in particular in 2 weeks' time against the Miami Dolphins, who are a bottom 5 team against the tight end position. That game has potential to be somewhat shootouty, and definitely getting a guy like him involved wouldn't be a bad thing, to say the least. Does play the Rams this week, coming out of a bye, and then that Miami game, and then finishes out against the Minnesota Vikings, who are also a little leaky against the tight end position. And that's a division game for Aaron Rodgers. And again, Green Bay is still kind of hovering around the concepts of, a playoff spot. They can't win their division, but right now with the New York Giants and Washington Commanders hanging at the bottom of the wild card, you have Seattle, you have Detroit, you have Green Bay. And again, we talked about how all those NFC South teams still have a chance based on their division. So these are guys we're looking at. Robert Tonyan with Green Bay is one of them. And our last tight end, Hunter Henry, hasn't had quite the season he had last year with Mac Jones, but has come around a little bit. And I think defenses kind of go his way when you don't have a lot of offensive weapons. But he's got some juicy matchups down the stretch. This week against the Las Vegas Raiders, Cincinnati Bengals there in the middle, who aren't terrible, but are suspect against the tight end a little bit. And then against the Miami Dolphins again, who just really, we talked about, they don't like to play defense. They just try to outscore you. So again, with 2 out of 3 matchups being top 10 with Hunter Henry, definitely worth that stream, in the final week here of 15 and 17. Week 16, you might be able to back off them. But again, these guys, even if we're saying take a week off, doesn't mean drop them. We're talking about these matchups as a whole, where now you might even want to cut some bait of people that just don't fit the mold. That fifth running back that's never going to play for you. Hang on to some of these guys, because again, they can turn around and win you a week when it means the most in your championship and in your playoffs.
Yeah, that's a great point, because like you said, we had talked about preparing your roster for the playoffs and, some of the things that you want to do, handcuffing your running backs, things like that, picking up extra defenses. If you are not set at tight end, which, a lot of teams aren't, I would say probably half of the league. Now, I don't know which half is going to make the playoffs, probably the half with the good tight ends. But if you got other guys in your league or other girls in your league that are also streaming tight ends, you could go through and pick up Conklin and Robert Tonyan, for example. Now you've got Detroit week 15, Miami week 16, Seattle week 17, and you have 3 top 5 matchups versus the tight end position. So if you want to roster both of those players, I more power to you. I don't think it's a bad idea. I'm not huge on Robert Tonyan, but again, with the matchup where it is and Green Bay needing to win that game, that they're going to pull out all the stops and try to score any way they can. So, and really all you need is a touchdown from your tight end to really make your week. So that's definitely doable for Big Shot Bob.
Yeah. One catch, 5 yards, 1 touchdown. It's like, oh, cool. Thanks for double digits, man.
Yeah, right. Lastly, we're going to move into defense there's a couple of them here. Defenses is strange because so pretty much every defense can be considered under 50% roster, just depending on the week that you look at them. There are a few, the really good ones like the Cowboys, the Bills, that just people don't drop. So those ones, kind of aren't available. But some of the ones that are available in leagues that are, kind of picked up and dropped here and there that may be available in your league. First one is the Los Angeles Chargers. I know that they haven't been a really good defense. They're actually one of the bottom scoring fantasy defenses. And actually one of the bottom regular, real defenses in the NFL. But they have 2 really good matchups, week 16 and 17. They play against the Indianapolis Colts, who are the worst team against opposing defenses in fantasy football, and then the Rams, who are the second worst team versus opposing defenses. You'd have to get through Tennessee in week 15 if you picked up the Chargers. But honestly, they played a really good game against a really good Miami Dolphins offense last night. I think that the Chargers are starting to come around, and I think that they realize that they've got a shot to make the playoffs, but they really have to tighten things up on the defensive side of the ball if they want that to happen. Another good defense out of the same division, the Kansas City Chiefs. They get Houston this week, 15, and then Seattle in week 16, which is a little bit tougher matchup. And then they get the Denver Broncos again, which they just finished with 15 fantasy points this past week against those Denver Broncos. So 2 good matchups there. Those are actually 2 defenses that I like pairing. Again, if you can pick both of them up this week, you're set for defense for the rest of your playoffs. You can play Kansas City, and then you can drop Kansas City after this week if you'd like. And then you've got the Chargers against, again, 2 of the worst fantasy offenses in the league, week 16 and 17. So I don't think that's a bad matchup there, a bad group to grab.
All right. Philadelphia Eagles. Everybody knows they are one of the best defenses in the league. And fantasy-wise, 2 out of 3 matchups being solid, 1 being on paper suspect, but we'll talk about that in a second. Philadelphia got the Chicago Bears. They have the New Orleans Saints, 2 of their last 3 matchups. 2 teams that are basically bottom 5, give or take, against defense. And the Dallas Cowboys are in there that are one of the best because of the offense. I know some of that's a little inflated from that outburst against the Colts there the other week. But again, they've had a high power offense. And I mean, again, the Eagles themselves really they've had 1 game where they were under 5 points. They've had multiple double-digit games since their week 7 bye, 32 sacks, 6 picks, 5 forced fumbles, and 3 of those were recovered. again, those are the things on top of the regular points per game and everything else that really kind of get you where you need to be. I mean, they're averaging under 20 points a game that they give up. They're giving up less than 300 yards a game. So again, this is a team that if they're out there, they shouldn't be, but if they're out there, that should be a priority waiver pickup. And I feel like you could probably start them with confidence for the rest of the season. And then finally, Minnesota Vikings. They are sitting on a couple good matchups. You got the Indianapolis Colts this week, who after things being what they were against Dallas, that number is maybe a smidge inflated, but they're still really bad. They give up a lot of points to defenses. The Giants seem to be kind of fading a little bit. It's a younger team, younger coaching staff, and we'll see how they go for their playoff push. But Minnesota, who has been pretty solid, they get the Giants there in week 16. And then finally, that week 17 matchup we talked about a few minutes ago with the Green Bay Packers, who are about 10th, 11th worst when it comes to, again, giving up points to defenses. It happens through turnovers. It happens through keeping points low, keeping passing yards and overall yardage low and stuff like that. So Minnesota and Philadelphia, again, Philly is probably rostered. I'd say you probably don't have a shot. Minnesota, you might. Again, somebody may have dropped them, whatever. They thought this and that. The third, they dropped an extra defense that they had on their roster. Those are the ways some of these shake out. Definitely want to look to pick those up if they're available in your league.
Yeah, and one other honorable mention, which again probably not available in your league, but the Tennessee Titans, they get the Houston Texans in week 16. That's the week that Kansas City plays Seattle, but Kansas City has two really good matchups, week 15 and week 17. So if you compare Kansas City with Tennessee, it's also a really good pairing that I like if you can grab both of those defenses. Now, with the week that Kansas City just had, they might be a little tough to grab them, but if you have them, hold on to them. If you don't have them and they're available, definitely go ahead and pick them up because I think they're going to do extremely well. Kansas City is one of those teams that because they score, they force other teams to throw the ball, which is where you get a lot of your points as far as, fantasy points come from in the defense position, because when teams are running the ball, the time goes quicker. It's very hard to get turnovers or far less fumbles than there are interceptions. You can't get sacks when teams aren't dropping back to pass. So it's a little bit more difficult for teams to score, defenses to score against teams that run the ball a lot and run very well. But the beauty that the Kansas City Chiefs has is that even when they go up against teams that want to run the ball, they look up and it's 21-0, and now all of a sudden they've had to abandon the run and throw the ball more often, and that's where Kansas City makes their money. So I do really like them going into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, that is going to do it for our streamers section. We're going to sort of kind of hit that again, not the same teams, but we'll be looking at matchups again moving forward into next week. But we wanted to make sure that we gave you the entire playoff streamers, at least the players that you could be picking up now for the entire playoff run, because this is the week where you need to get them. Moving back into next week, we're going to just do regular streamers start sit, during our start sit section. But we wanted to make sure that we gave you some options to get out there and pick up off of your waiver wire. Your waiver should be clearing either Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. We wanted to make sure that if you wanted to grab these guys because of those potential matchups, we were able to give you that information now. So good luck. Hopefully you use it to your advantage and go on and take home a fantasy championship. That's the goal, right?
Yeah, I guess you
win
want
at least one of them.
You want to win, yeah.
That makes me happy. If I can win one championship out of the 8 leagues that I have that I'm playing in, I'm content with one championship. I mean, you always like more, obviously, but can't get greedy, I guess.
No, it gives you some satisfaction. Definitely, definitely fills you up there at the end of the season. So you don't despair and want to jump off the cliff of fantasy football. No, definitely.
Yeah, instead you win one, and now you want to get in 5 more leagues next year.
Yeah, that's the other side of it. It's bad.
All right, well, before we head out, we do want to thank Mickey's Pub in Tuckerton, New Jersey. If you're looking to go out and catch some NFL games, Mickey's is the place to do it. They have great food, drink specials, and all the NFL games you can handle. Mickey's Pub, 327 East Main Street in Tuckerton, New Jersey, where friends and family meet. Also, please click the little plus if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Click the subscribe if you are listening to us on YouTube. We do appreciate all of the follows and subscriptions. It allows us to continue to do the podcast and continue to bring hopefully some championship information to you guys out there listening. Follow us on social media for more updates. We do tweet out some stuff, as far as like injuries and updates and things like that. We are at the 9 Route 1 and at Scott from Delco. You can also check out our website if you missed any episodes. They're all on there. Our website is www.the9routeffb.com, or you can email the show with any questions, comments, concerns at the9routeffb@gmail.com. Scott, you got anything else before we head out of here for the night?
No, folks. Again, hopefully we gave you some tips and tricks that'll help you win your league. We do this for fun, but we do this because we want to know that we did help. Again, Pat, I know you mentioned somebody that you work with that listens to our show and listens to the podcast, loyal member that we actually help give some credible information to. And again, they said that kind of helped get them over the hump and get them a championship. So, you can listen to what we say. You could choose to go the opposite way and do that, kind of backdoor way and say, these guys don't know what they're talking about. I'll take the other side of it. But at the end of the day, no, again, we appreciate everybody out there listening. We hope that we can help you get deeper and deeper into your playoffs all the way to a championship win. And you could say that it happened in part due to your help here from Pat and Scott at the 9 Route. So for Pat, I am Scott, and we will catch you in the next one. Peace.